Welcome. You're listening to Literacy Now, the official podcast for the nonprofit organization Parents for Reading Justice, and I am your host, Brett Tingley.
Reading matters. How we teach it matters even more. Without equitable learning opportunities, students get left behind, left without the ability to advance their skills and unlock their potential. It shouldn't be that way. IMSE exists to change that, and we won't rest until we do. With decades of experience rooted in the science of reading, IMSE has long been the educator's most trusted ally. We refine the best of structured literacy and Orton-Gillingham to equip educators with the knowledge, tools, and support they need to make a difference in the classroom for every student at every age and every stage. Literacy success is possible through superior training, tools, and support. Learn it better, teach it better, until every person reads. IMSE.
We are so excited to have Dr. Rebecca Tolson with us here today. She is the director of the Center for Structured Literacy at the University of Akron. Would you like to add anything to that, Rebecca?
Sure. Hi, Brett. Thanks for having me. A little bit of my background. I started as a fifth grade teacher. So I'm an elementary school teacher at heart. I moved into professional development training teachers, and I was vice president of literacy initiatives for the Neuhaus Education Center in Houston, Texas, and before my current position at the University of Akron.
So that's a little bit about your technical background. And I often try to give guests an opportunity to tell us this is how you got into this business, but a little bit about why you're doing the work that you're doing. What is your why?
Okay, so I've got two. One, I always start out as just at the onset, I was a general education fifth grade teacher. And that was my first original why, because when I started teaching, I was trained in the era that, whole language didn't use phonics. I wasn't trained in that in my undergrad. So I loved teaching thematic units. I loved getting kids excited about reading. But what I didn't have in my toolbox was how to actually teach reading to a struggling reader. So when I first realized, what do I do with these struggling readers in my fifth grade? And they can get to fifth grade without being taught to read. So yes. I was a deer in headlights, to be honest with you. So a mentor at my school, who is a Wilson language trainer now, Lori Josephson, she came into my classroom. She's like, here, use these resources, teach this, and take these classes. And she encouraged me, nudged me. And I just couldn't get enough. And that first Orton-Gillingham class, it was at Notre Dame College. And I got to tell you, I had taught fifth grade for 5 years when I took that class. And I had never heard the terminologies before. What's a phoneme? What's a grapheme? What's a morpheme? How does the language work? And I got to be honest, I was angry. Why didn't I know this? How can I be in the classroom teaching and not even heard this before? So that was in the mid 90s. And so this is my 32nd year in education. And that's when I started, okay, this is my passion. This is what needs to change. We got to teach kids to read in the right way. So that started my journey of taking classes. So my why was those first kiddos in fifth grade that I wasn't really able to help because I didn't have the training knowledge, But my second why is I have a family of history of reading disabilities. And so, I have several whys that are very personal to me because I have relatives that struggled with reading and that I've seen that didn't have the best outcomes. So it's very personal to me and from a professional standpoint. So those are my two whys.
Yes. Most of us have, most parents always have a why that's very personal. But I think it makes an educator even better when they have that personal. It's like the cancer doctor who gets cancer. All of a sudden they understand what the stakes really are. You brought up that you were not aware of the science of reading, which there are very few. So a few of the academics that we've interviewed, Jan Hasbrook, Margie Gillis, were lucky enough to kind of go to school in that era, but nobody else is getting that. So a parent is often confused when they go in to talk to the teacher. They think they know everything. They know about dyslexia. They know how to teach reading. So it's you think that they know about it. I want parents to know that most teachers do not know about the science of reading. So if that is the case, what is the best way to approach a teacher who doesn't know about it and whose College of Education has probably taught them that the science of reading is not to be followed? How do you convince them?
So, over my years of experience with professional development and coaching in my role at Neuhaus and previous to that, my answer is based on my experience, and that is student data. When the data, when you talk about student data, it is not personal. It is, this is what the data is. Are they reading or aren't they reading? Are they below grade level or not? The data shows that. So this kiddo can't read first grade words or second grade words or whatever, and is not passing the comprehension. So we aren't talking about philosophical. We're looking at the student saying, what does this student need? And that grabs teachers, because now it's not this, I believe this and you believe this. Here's a student, this data doesn't lie. Now let's take a look at this. So the data helps us have a common ground of concern for a student. That's my number one. Now, all teachers want to improve student outcomes. No question. I always say in PD, I've never come across a teacher that says, no, I don't want to teach a kiddo to read. They just don't. They want to teach kids to read. So my second part to that is introducing them to a structured literacy, so an introductory course. So if you can even do a staff, like empowering to parents and educators and even leaders, is if you can expose them to the science, the structure of the language, that's empowerment to them. So that's saying, oh, I've got the student that has this struggle. You actually have a how I can help. And this is making sense now. So I think it is a continuum of change management, change growth for a teacher to say, not like do it my way, but it's more of I'm looking at the student and I need ways to help, and you're presenting evidence of what could help that child. So that's really, and I think it doesn't have to be a 30-hour course or a 2-year course with practicum. We have to start somewhere with exposure. A lot of, when we did legislation for professional development in Ohio, we suggested a 3-day just overview course. Right there, teachers can learn basics on the science that they didn't get in their pre-service teacher preparation programs, maybe in some of the way they were presented in their core curriculum, how reading should be taught. And I mean, that introduction can just be the launch for teachers. And that's what I've seen, the launch, because I see those faces of teachers saying, wow, this is what was missing. And I've even had teachers say to me recently, within the last couple of weeks, when they go through training that is structured literacy, where has this been for the last 20 years of my career, right? They know it when they see it. They know it's working.
How do you, so we are both in Ohio, and I have districts that call me to this day in Ohio, and we are passing good legislation, but they are balanced literacy districts in the administration all the way through. Mm-hmm. So for a teacher who might be, very early in this journey, their whole district is not going to any structured literacy training. How do you, is there any resource or any data, like a district or a story that you share with an individual teacher to kind of help them maybe step out of their comfort zone?
So, what I think, I believe in the power of the individual teacher. Even though I know systems change takes leadership, it needs to come from the top. To really change the entire system, you've got to get to the leaders first. However, if you're in that classroom and you know what's best, like let's say you've been exposed to structured literacy and you have something that is systematic, explicit, sequential, cumulative, and you work, you know what, I learned this and I'm going to use it with my students. And I always say the data is the proof. So if you say, here, I'm tracking and this help is helping. This is helping that child. I taught this, they're mastering it, they're reading better, they're understanding, they're putting these together. Let's say they couldn't read CVC words. They were making all kinds of errors, inaccurate, non-fluent. So transpositions, insertions, omissions, all of those errors. And all of a sudden I see, they were 50% accurate and now they're 90% accurate. And I taught them something and now, 2 weeks later, we've got 90, 100%, they're ready to move. So I'm seeing that. I said that individual teacher can say, this data says this is working. I'm going to keep doing that. This is best for my students right here. I've got this data. So I always say, go in empowered. The research shows it, but also just the practical data of what's working for your students. You can't refute that. You say, if it's working, don't take it away from me. I'm going to use it. So I always say exponentially. Even if I teach a PD of students and of teachers, and I've got a handful out of a large group that really believe in it, take it back and use it. Think about a teacher's career, 30 years of students of a classroom that they're impacting over the course of their career. How many kids just one teacher's impacting to do the right thing? So I believe that even if you maybe if you're a district that isn't there yet for that transition to structured literacy, science of reading, you can empower from your classroom. I believe firmly. So I try to get to every teacher, even though we want to get to every leader.
Well, and what I think is interesting, and actually this is giving me an idea for subsequent podcasts, is to talk to some districts that can share with us their very specific data, and then we can encourage parents to send this podcast to their districts to help them understand what is possible. I know that Kareem Weaver talks about a podcast, something like Ordinary Districts Getting Extraordinary Results. And so, because if you're that first teacher in a district, and if you're a parent and you say, I've been looking on the internet and I found this thing called structured literacy, even though they've just gotten their degree from college and they say, oh, all this phonics stuff is crazy, you have to have some data that's external that you can show them. So I think that's an interesting idea. Let's shift into, so say you are successful as a parent in bringing your district to the science of reading from a balanced literacy approach. So what kind of are the main steps that you are going to see or collaborate with your district in making to shift from a balanced literacy district to a structured literacy district?
So here's what you have to do in that shift. First of all, it's an overhaul of the system. It is an overhaul of the system. You can't keep doing what you've always done and get different results. So if we're going to transition, you have to, first of all, develop a literacy plan that starts with the why. Why? You have to get the buy-in. Why are we changing? And the why of we changing is based on that science. So as soon as we say, science says we need to move in this direction, more kids are going to learn to read. All other disabilities, all other kiddos, all other languages, they can learn. Their ability is there to learn to read. So it's less than 1% that have been shown you can't reach. 99% of kids can learn to read.
Wow.
And
I've heard 95. I've never heard 99. That's extraordinary.
And I believe that. And I've got, I believe it was in the updated, and I have to look back, but I believe it was in the updated Teaching Reading is Rocket Science report that I got, but I could be wrong. I'd have to look that up. I know. And the reason that stuck with me is I've seen that. The severe, since dyslexia is on a spectrum, mild, moderate, severe, and profound. I've had the ones that are in high school that are less than a percentage, like a percentile of in their scores, like low, with structured literacy, learn to read. And I'm like, it's not magic. It's structured language. It's the how and what you teach, and it's systematic. So if I can do it, other teachers can do it. And so once you get the why, you now have to present the how. So the buy and the why, you have to have that background. Like, why are we shifting? Why are we changing? Now, how are we going to change? And I got to tell you, you have to address systems and structures. So it's kind of, I think of this like a multiplication, just like the simple view of reading is, decoding word decoding times comprehension, language comprehension equals reading comprehension. So you have to think of it like that formula. So systems and structures like your schedule, your personnel management, training your teachers, your screener. It's all of those systems. It's your progress monitoring. It's your data collection. It's your data analysis. It's your reporting. What do we do with the data? Is it working? So it's a true, strong MTSS system where you can analyze and put into those structure and places what is working and shift if it's not working. If a kiddo shows that you're doing something for, so many data points and it's not helping, the teacher needs to make a change. It's all about her decisions based on what students need. And the data is driving that. Are they learning with this program, with this method, in this area? And if not, I need to intensify it. This is your true MTSS. I need to intensify it. Maybe it's not what I'm teaching. I'm not teaching and giving them time to practice enough. So it could be instructional time, practice time, all those variables. She's the expert. She's making the decisions. But in addition to the systems and structures, Brett, it is also your instruction and your curriculum. So you have to look at differentiated instruction. You've got to look at your programs, and your programs need to be, and I want you to think of these three because they're essential. They all work together. They don't work apart. They work together. You've got your core program, and that's where your general education, most kiddos should be learning in your core program. So those programs need to be vetted and tried and true to teach the majority. And if your kiddos aren't learning with the majority, learning to read with the majority of the curriculum you're using, so if you're not showing majority results, then that curriculum needs changed. And the data is showing us that. It's not working. So you've got your core program, you've got your supplemental program. So the reason that there's a need for supplemental, and this is where I see every child should have the opportunity to learn structure from a structured literacy program. That is the structure of the language explicitly, directly, and systematically taught to every child. Every child. Now, I'm just going to give you an example because I have experience with all types of structured literacy programs, and they all work. I love them all. I had a hard time choosing, and I let the data help me choose when I got a student or a group of students. I say, what does this group or student need, and which one is going to make? If it was an older student, I might pick one over the other because I think we don't have time to waste, right? We got to hurry. This child's 16 years old. I got to get them ready for whatever life they need, whatever career, job, whatever. And so I would choose a specific program because it was nuts and bolts for older kiddos, tried and true. Kiddos that are younger that might have writing disabilities like dysgraphia, I would choose a specific structured literacy program that had more of that handwriting, writing practice, because that was a struggle or a need. Each one adds a little different strength to it based on, but that routine should be embedded in every single district, every classroom. So like at Neuhaus, for example, we do a 30-minute structured literacy routine that every child should get. And it is the basics of the structure of the language. Every syllable type, every sound symbol correspondence is taught explicitly and practiced. These are not reading disability kiddos. These are typicals. Everybody should have the opportunity to know how the language works. So that's where structured literacy can come in. And then if I need to small group review, reteach, practice more, I can do that in my small groups, but every child should have the opportunity to learn the language. Our core programs, our big box core programs, are not designed to teach structured literacy, which is why you should supplement with a structured literacy program. Those have been accredited and vetted through whatever accreditation. Could be Center for Effective Reading Instruction has a list of them. IMSLECT, International Multisensory Structured Language Education Council, has a list of them. But a structured literacy program, you are not going to find all in a box course set, okay? So you've got your core program, you've got your supplemental structured literacy. That needs to be embedded in your Tier 1, Tier 2 instruction, and Tier 3, any MTSS. It's about intensity as they need more help. Lastly is your intervention. So your intervention program is specifically now designed, and it has evidence, and it shows evidence that kiddos learn to read with reading disabilities, that intervention program. So some structured literacy programs might do supplemental and not intervention. Some have all three. It just depends. But you know, sometimes because we can speak the language across the core, it's not necessarily, and I choose not to really talk about programs specifically, but I know what it is and what it's not, right? And so I'm going to give you an example, Brett. I'm just going to go out on a limb because I believe in this. I have a lot of examples of districts doing it right. And the reason I chose this district was, and I'm one of our districts that we work with is Fort Worth Independent School District in Texas. And when they made the decision, I'm going to give them, I didn't even talk to them to say, hey, can I use this as an example? But I'm gonna go out there on a limb as an example in this because I think it's important for us to see. They went through a process of how do we teach reading in this district? And they made the shift to science of reading, and they chose a core program that has been vetted by the state, that has been vetted as a list. Hey, I can teach kiddos. It shows evidence that it works for the majority of kiddos. They chose a supplemental program. So do you want to know what program they chose?
I would like to know. That's why it's so important to talk to you, because you're one of the first people I've met who's not afraid to say names of programs. So this you're not saying it's perfect, but this is an example, a living, breathing case study that's working like a beta test in a district, and the core. And if you would just name what they chose, I think it's okay to say the name.
Well, so here's what I love about Fort Worth is Fort Worth used Amplify as their core, and they used Neuhaus as their supplemental. So every classroom, and it was non-negotiable. You don't get to choose to use or not use. This is the way the district is going, because this combination of teaching kiddos is going to make sure that everybody has what a core program can offer. The supplemental science structured literacy is the language taught in a specific scope and sequence. So those supplemental programs must be accredited and vetted. That's the important point. Somebody needs to put a stamp of approval on that, yes, this program, if you do this with fidelity from beginning to end, kiddos will learn to read. And that's where the language aspect is put in, the structured literacy. So they used Amplify and Neuhaus, and they said this is the every single, and they went in and they boxed up everything that was not any leveled readers, anything that was not structured literacy. They just boxed it up and they said it's not going to be in the buildings. Let's get it out. And then their intervention, they can also, they used an accredited for dyslexia. So that included certification for those teachers. So that's important because they use the Neuhaus BLS, Basic Language Skills, which is accredited through IMSLEC. So they're taking those, it's specifically designed for intervention, and it's more intensive. So you're talking 45 to 60 minutes a day in those intervention groups over long periods of time, so it can be consistent from grade to grade. You don't want to start one thing in third grade and then say, oh, wait a minute, the fourth grade teacher isn't trained. Intervention means with dyslexia, we're going to make sure our teachers are not only trained, but they're certified to show that they can make progress with students that have reading disabilities. So if it is a diagnosed disability, we have that handled in this district, okay? So I know that that's one example. There are others. There are other examples of putting core programs with structured literacy programs and intervention programs, that combination. What I'd like to do is a shout out for Colorado for vetting and posting and creating rubrics that make sense for that structure. They get it. The state of Colorado every year vets programs, and they're in the process right now of vetting programs for middle school. So, middle school supplemental programs that show evidence that they work for struggling older readers. So I think it's worth saying, check that list out because I like the way that's organized. Here's the reason I like it's organized is because not one program meets the need of every reader, every student. Some kids will learn with the core, but others might need a combination of that structure, and some need the intervention. So we know if you say, hey, no, we do this program, we got it covered, there's no way you can have it covered. 100% of kids cannot read with one program. So that's why I like that 3 buckets, so to speak: core, supplemental, and intervention.
Parents for Reading Justice is a nonprofit grassroots movement dedicated to ensuring every child learns to read by engaging parents and educators in adopting the science of reading. Please watch our award-winning film, Our Dyslexic Children, take our masterclass, and to ensure all our services remain free of charge, please consider making a donation today, all at parentsforreadingjustice.org.
That's interesting because my understanding was, and I know, so a core program is, they all have to communicate with one another though, and dovetail with one another. Mm-hmm. But then the structured literacy supplemental, all kids though should get that, because even kids, the spectrum, even kids who are gifted can benefit, because who knows how well they could read. And instead of saying, we're just going to get kids to average or wherever they are, why not get them to their potential where they could and should be? So do all children get the supplemental structured literacy, even gifted, all the way through?
They absolutely do not, but they should. It's a disservice to our kiddos not to give them to them. So that's why, the way Neuhaus is structured is, we started out with dyslexia. That's our core. We started out with a family, and then created an organization to train kiddos and teachers for dyslexia. And we quickly realized, oh my goodness, all kids could use this information. This isn't just kids that have dyslexia. This is for all kids and all teachers. And so, we expanded into the general education and said, this is good professional development. It's intensive with practicum, and it's the structure of the language. based on an Orton-Gillingham scope and sequence. Those are tried and true scope and sequences for the language. How should we teach the language, simple to complex? Every child has the right to learn that, how words work. Now, here's the interesting. I taught kiddos that had twice exceptionality. They had high IQs, but they also had reading disabilities. So I'm telling you, talk about the first time I taught it, they get it like that. I mean, the other kids might need lots of practice and repetition, and those kids like, move on, I got it. But here's the thing. A child, even a typical child, once you teach them that, oh my gosh, when you add this suffix to this word, or you have a multisyllabic word and you can break long words down, a second grader is like, wow, they're getting to chapter books and information that they never would have got to if somebody didn't explain the language to them. So they gobble it up. They're waiting for the next thing. They don't have to have a reading disability to get that. We're holding it back from students that we shouldn't be. Every child should learn it that way.
And you know Andrea Rosen, and she, every time she speaks in our district, she's our literacy expert. I learn something every single time, and I learn to read fairly easily, I think. But they were talking about the roots of the English language and how when you eat a cow, like a chicken and a cow. But when you eat them, the French word beef, boeuf, and poulet, poultry, somehow there was some historical background. Just fascinating. I've never learned that. Yeah.
I mean, it's so funny you'd say that, Brett, because, my husband and I always joke. He goes, I think I paid tuition for 20 years. I mean, I'm pretty sure. It could have been even more than 20 years. Like, I could not take enough classes. He's like, another class. I got to learn this. Like, you can never master the language completely. Like, even teachers, like, there is always something new to learn. There's always something new that you can get from how the language works, morphology, upper level. And you're like, as soon as a teacher knows and a child says, why is it spelled that way? The teacher can explain it from a linguistic standpoint. And the kids are like, oh, okay, now I understand. They feel so smart. And I actually had kiddos when I taught structure of language, and I was really like a multisensory grammar class, like how does, what are the parts of speech and how do they work within the sentence? And I actually had a third grader go in and teach her class about the parts of speech as the teacher. And the teacher's like, I don't know how she learned that, but man, because I had been working with her so long by that point, and she knew it. And she's like, yeah, no, I'm going to explain this, and we're going to mark these sentences up and, expand these sentences. And I was so proud of her. But think about that, Brett. What confidence did that give that student?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
She was the teacher of her peers for something language when she had a language disability. And that wasn't because she couldn't learn it. That was because she was taught, and now she understood it. And
she others. Probably knew more than her teacher, unfortunately. But maybe she taught her teacher.
Yeah.
One of the things that you mentioned that is very interesting to me, because I think everybody loves to work with kindergarten through third grade. Biggest bang for the buck. That's where you get the most impact. And so then later they work on the older kids. So I always have this soft spot because a lot of districts, like I said, will go in and they'll add, Wilson Foundations to get that structured literacy piece. And they'll, everybody starts getting OG. But the kids who are in junior high and high school, we missed them. And that's kind of awkward. And so as someone who's really experienced with these older kids, what can we do? Are there programs? Are there, do you do the same thing that you do with little kids? What do you do with older kids?
Okay, so here's where I want to start with this. We use a saying at Neuhaus, it's the stage, not the age. So here's how you need to view. And I love Jean Charles reading development stages. Love them. And we use reading development stages to explain the development and where kiddos are and where they need to be. So if you could be working with a child that's in middle school or high school that is on stage 0, which is really print awareness, like reading road signs and, hey, there's McDonald's or, Walmart. I see the signs, like really, because they're, I'm going to say completely, I was taught back in the day, language blocked. Like how they process language, it's just not. And so you have to systematically, explicitly teach every sound, symbol, concept, every concept of the language for them to open up and to process the part of the brain that analyzes words and becomes literate. So here's the stage. They might be at a stage 0 or 1. I have no problem going in and being in front of a group of middle schoolers or a group of high schoolers saying, here we are, A, apple, let's go. Like reading decks, explaining it, and they're like, why didn't everybody ever show us? And we might stumble over it. But here's the thing, I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to work my scope and sequence to teach them every concept of the language to become a reader. That's been done already. We know what those scope and sequences look like. We know how to teach each concept directly, how to practice it. I'm going to give them more intensity when they're older because they need more practice. I have to teach it. They need practice. And when they show mastery, when they can read the words, I can't read the words. I have to teach you how to read the words. So I'm going to tell you how it works. I'm going to tell you how to put them together. I'm going to give you the opportunity to practice with me. There's no shame. There's no embarrassment. We're all here together. We're all on the same stage. And so how you group those students is important because here we are together. I've had groups of students. It's like, don't you even think about snickering at each other. We're all here together and we all need to learn. Okay. So once I build the trust, then I start getting momentum because this isn't funny. They all want to be readers. Let's be honest. They all want to do what the other kids are doing, regardless of their age. So that's where your group is pretty small. You're giving the instruction. I don't let them drive the bus. I'm driving the bus because I know what you need and I know what's best for you. And that's just like any parent who say, it's just not a good idea for you to be out at 2 a.m. or whatever. The curfew is for their best, right? So, it's the same way. Like, I'm not messing around. We have so many, and I'll tell parents where I'll say, oh my gosh, they might be in 5th grade, but if we start now, it's going to take me a couple years to get through a structured literacy program. But boy, before high school, we could have it. We could have them on grade level by high school. So let's get going. I got 3 years or whatever. And, by the time they get into high school, we're good to go. So that's what you need to look at, moving them along the developmental stages where I understand decoding and I'm mastering this language. Now I'm becoming fluent. Now I'm getting some speed to me. And now the comprehension's coming because I'm not clunky and missing words and making mistakes. And I'm not afraid to try books that are hard because I've got the skills and the confidence to do so. So I'm moving them along those stages. That's what you do with older kids.
Well, and I think what you're saying about the trust is so important because, Stephen Dykstra we've interviewed him, talks a lot about the trauma that kids are dealing with. And by the time they're older, they have failed over and over and over. And so I think not as important, but I would say very critical to begin working with a child is to gaining that trust.
Oh, 100%. I would say 4 to 6 weeks of working with a student or group, especially, and at any age, you've got to build the trust. The little ones, I've had little ones that thought that it was a treat. Like, yay, I get to go see Mrs. Tolson. It's so good. Why doesn't everybody do this? Like they don't think it's a bad thing. Like, but then other ones were like, why do I have to go? Like, I don't want to get out of the car, right? But then, you know what? There has to be a hook and there has to be a relationship. And they have to learn. And I'll never forget this story that one time I had a parent tell me, I had one of those little powders that come in like, I don't want to be here. And he would go back out to the car. And the mom told me, well, I don't like it, but she knows what she's talking about. Like they start realizing it's working. And so they start opening up and relaxing because they're like, okay, you know. And I think when the intervention isn't working or the intervention isn't proven and the instructor isn't certified and trained, I would never have taught a child without being mentored. I had so much coursework underneath people that knew what they were doing. I think of it, I always use the medical. I think of it like your medical internship. You would never put a doctor in surgery without being apprenticed. And I think, okay, I can't tell you the people. And I was the one that, okay, I have questions like, why isn't this working? What do I do here? As I walked through, I was being mentored to do this myself. That is part of that practicum. That's essential. Now, then I could transition. Okay, I passed the exam. I know the knowledge. I have somebody that says, yeah, she's done this with multiple students. She's ready to do this on her own. That's where the certification. So every district should have a certified person, multiple certified people in the long run. Because you need to make sure that any child that needs that intensity has basically in the field a surgeon. My child deserves a surgeon if they need him.
Well, and I think that's absolutely true. I think we need to elevate that conversation. Kareem Weaver and I have had conversations. He mentions the University of California, San Francisco Dyslexia Center. And for older children, they don't even start interventions with an older kid for 6 months. And for the first 6 months, they do just therapy, just to help the kid get over the PTSD of what they have endured already.
So that's interesting, Brett. When I was trained at Southern Methodist University for my therapy, that's where I went for my master's degree and my certified academic language therapy. And I had wonderful professors and wonderful mentors. And you know what? I remember there was a part of that routine that was called History of the Language. And there were multiple things we could do in that section. It was like the first 5 minutes of the lesson. And you could talk about where does language come from? How do we get language? How did it, from symbols to sign language you could do all kinds of fun things to get the hook. One of the options is to talk about dyslexia or talk about how, reading, things that are hard. Like I could talk about things that are hard for me so they could get a little window into things that are hard. I'm an adult, but maybe I have struggles. And you build this relationship that they feel like it's okay to struggle with something. It's okay that language is hard. And I could talk about, and with the parents' permission, we were able to have conversations of opening that up to just unpack the trauma.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, which brings me to what I know is the true root of the problem. And I'm sad to say that most colleges of education, although you are affiliated with some who do understand the science of reading, and I want to talk to you about that in a minute, but most teacher prep programs in this country are not following the science of reading, evidence-based reading instruction, structured literacy. So first tell us, what are those colleges that are following the science that you're aware of? Name off a few and let's give them a shout out. And then let's talk about how we can flip these others.
Yeah, well, so, Walsh University got on board with a grant from the Ohio Department of Ed and the higher education from Ohio. And then also, Mount St. Joe's University, Antioch University Methodist, all of those are on the from Ohio are on the IDA University accredited partners list. And so there is a process that universities can go through to say that their coursework is aligned. So the books that teachers read and the textbooks and the books and the resources and the training and the syllabi and the quizzes and the tests are aligned with the science of reading and structured literacy to train teachers to understand dyslexia and what to do about it at the onset. And so IDA has that list. I say, get a hold of that list, because from IDA, it's on their website, and those are the ones that have been vetted. They've gone through a process. They put their time, their money into saying, yes, we want to do this. We want the feedback. We want to do it right. So there are universities out there, not enough of them. I feel like we do need to address this issue. And back in the day, right after we passed in 2012, passed the first Ohio dyslexia laws, we had a chancellor who, Jim Petro, I think his name was, who was over higher education, that had us integrate courses for higher ed as a requirement. And I think it depends on who's in leadership at the state and higher education to say, this is a requirement. This is non-negotiable. This is what our training, our courses need to train teachers properly. So we need full alignment. And that's where it has to come from, in my opinion. And so it can't be negotiable.
Well, another source that I am very familiar with to figure out where your universities are on this continuum of understanding and accepting the science of reading is the NCTQ, or the National Council on Teacher Quality. And I think they do an amazing job. And they had a hard time getting this data at first, but they are getting better and more data. And they give colleges of education a grade on how well they are teaching research-based or evidence-based reading instruction.
You're exactly right.
They're coming out with a new one, and I want to interview their president, Heather Pesky, on this, because to me, that is a market force. I do think the IDA list would be interesting, because you could just say to your district, are they on the IDA list or not? The NCTQ is also very, very valuable, though, because you can begin publicizing that, and you can move people from going to that university for their education degree, and you can move districts away from hiring from them if they don't get it.
That's right. I think that is, and I had a curriculum director tell me from back in the day, I won't hire someone from a university that does not teach this. So if think about it, if we changed our hiring practice to say, I don't want to have to train them, they need to become trained. Now I know it's a process. Like, I'm still going to have to do professional development, because you don't graduate with knowing everything, but at least knowing that there is that foundation of what the science is, what structured literacy is, how to use it, how to intervene if there's a problem. So why are we hiring from universities that don't train that way?
Well, and you can make a financial argument. If you hire from a college of education that is actually teaching scientifically based reading instruction, these teachers are ready when they get there. You are not wasting time, which is money, or money, which is money. Training all these new teachers, retraining them, like deprogramming them, and then putting in what's actually real. The unfortunate thing is that teacher prep programs are going to become almost obsolete if they are not keeping up with the science. So I'm glad you're affiliated.
That's why we built that into our certification and our professional development in the Ohio law. We gave universities the opportunity to say, districts, teachers can go through these programs and meet the requirements. University, it doesn't have to be a separate program. It could be through a university. So, Amy Murdoch runs the science of reading, coursework at Mount St. Joseph University. And so that's on the list of options. So districts have options, and it could be through universities, but it has to be aligned.
Most recently, Dr. Tolson and I have been working here locally in Ohio, and we are kind of helping the Department of Higher Education make sure that they have a really good audit team to come in and audit all 50 colleges of education. And we're very excited. It's beginning in really right now, January 2025. What is your perspective at a university right now with this whole audit?
So I think it's amazing. I have a team at the Center for Structural Literacy, University of Akron. We are preparing for that audit. And so what it gave us time to do in preparation is to go through our coursework and align our coursework to the higher ed metrics and the IDA knowledge and practice standards. So we spent months preparing and looking at our courses to see, are we introducing concepts that teachers need? Are we reviewing concepts teachers need? And are we applying it in the field so that they are apprenticed with concepts for teaching literacy, reading, writing, spelling, handwriting, all of that. So it's a great opportunity for growth for universities, and it's bringing everyone together to say, it's not a gotcha, it's how do we need to improve? And so we did that up front in preparation for uploading our syllabi, our coursework, our quizzes, activities, how we evaluate, and how are they aligned? And we just want to improve. We want to make sure teachers are well prepared. So it's a great opportunity in Ohio.
Well, and as a parent of a dyslexic child, we hope that every college of education in Ohio takes that same attitude. We are very excited and appreciative of the Department of Ed, and the Meadows Center is going to be doing the audits. We're super excited and looking forward to kind of bringing the level of instruction up in the state, because again, we've talked about this a million times, but the root of the problem is if colleges of education are behind the science, they're not keeping up, then we're churning out people every year who don't know how to teach kids to read. So the financial burden, time, resources is put on the districts. And so if we can clean this up,
right,
it will be magnificent.
Totally agree with you, Brett. It's a good thing.
Well, and you have mentioned, I wanted to thank you as a resident of Ohio for all the work that you did to get the dyslexia legislation passed here recently. And I'm hoping that it will, really help parents get districts to move to the science, because we are stuck in the past in Ohio for obvious reasons. But and what it makes me think is I have some concern, though, because we already have federal law, IDEA, that requires you find and you provide FAPE to especially dyslexic children, federal law. And it doesn't happen. I mean, all the time, our districts are not identifying children with dyslexia. I get calls literally every week. And there's statewide legislation. So I'm wondering, do you feel like this legislation here in Ohio is really going to take hold? And I'm just afraid until parents get activated and educated about the law and make sure that it actually gets into their children's district and into the classroom, that it may not be as effective as we'd like.
Well, I guess I have a perspective going back to 30 years ago when I was, advocating for dyslexia and in Ohio, and I would go into a meeting with a parent to discuss what was going on with a certain child. And if I even mentioned dyslexia, like, we don't talk about that, we don't mention it, it doesn't exist. It was taboo. To where we are today, that we have a guidebook, right? And we have a definition, and we we are trying to screen for it. So, I guess I've got this whole list. Is it going to work? I believe we have more educators that are wanting to and needing to learn how to teach children with this reading disability that is common. And so a lot of children, I was at a superintendent conference presenting last week in Columbus, and we had superintendents come to learn about how to implement the new dyslexia laws.
Wonderful.
2 sessions. It's a start. 10 years ago, would I've had superintendents coming to, to a session about dyslexia? Sometimes you have to set a policy and then you have to work the policy. And part of it is change management. And I did 30 minutes of what it is. We have to tell people what is dyslexia, how it's identified, how it's treated, what it is and what it's not, and know its prevalence. It's not just a few students in your district, and we have prevalence rates from, 15 to 20% that are current. We have, so you take 15 to 20% of your district. That's a lot of kids that could fall between the, cracks if we don't do this right. So there has to be an urgency. Do I think we're on the trajectory of something better? Yes. Yes, I do. I think we have to be very strategic about our next efforts. You can't ever stop. There's always, it always has to be, it's non-negotiable that we move in this direction. We just have to educate how to move there and why they need to move there.
How do you see parents, how can we help in that effort? Like, we worked locally in Ohio through our OH Kid organization. When the legislation, you actually helped write it. And so, but when you needed to get it passed through the legislature, or you needed to, there were different phases. So we were called in because we were constituents and voters. But are there any other ways that you think that parents can help really get this? Yeah.
I feel like school boards, I believe that you need to be meeting with your school board and you need to be educating them. I think why couldn't you do a 15-minute presentation at your school board? If every parent, every school board heard like I said, I put together an informational session for superintendents to say, here's what and the response was amazing. They were glad for the information. Here's what I did. You can give them resources. One of the best tools, IDA, the International Dyslexia Association, has fact sheets. And they have fact sheets that are written by professionals in the field. You've got neuroscientists, you've got professors, you've got researchers who put these together to say, here's what you need to do here in this area that has to do with teaching reading to kiddos with dyslexia. And so empower them with a packet and say, and a little presentation, so that now I'm more informed, I'm more knowledgeable. Resources. One of the best books that I read, it was given to me by the director of a private dyslexia school in Ohio, is Annual Growth for All Students and Catch-Up Growth for Those That Are Behind. And it's written by a school board in Washington State. And they made a charge to their district. I need 90% of kiddos reading on grade level by third grade. Now make it happen. The school board was adamant. This is their journey of what needed to change, what needed to happen. And that goes back to the systems change and the curriculum change. We have to make changes if it's not working. If the data is showing we're not doing good enough, then we have to make that change. So I would say resources and information and presentations to your school board. Here's what I believe about parents. I mean, never, ever, ever want to mess with a mama bear or a papa bear. Like, they come from deep in the soul of what is important, and that's their children. And we would go to great lengths to do what's right by our kids. Knowledge is power. A knowledgeable parent. So I say, educate yourself. Knowledge, the best, take your resources and learn to advocate with empowering with that knowledge. Once I have the knowledge, I can pass that knowledge on. So you can get in front of people that are decision makers that will make a difference, because like I said, present, as soon as you know the data, as soon as you know, present it and say, we might have 60% reading, but what about the other 40? I want to talk about the other 40. Why aren't we closer to where we need to be, and what needs to change? Let's talk about our systems. Let's talk about our curriculum and say, are we doing a good enough job? Are we doing a good enough job? Be persistent and network. Be persistent and network. You've got to not give up, because we've been doing this a long time. It's been 10 years for dyslexia legislation, over 10 years that we have worked on this. And I can't even tell you, the people that came before me, the people that I worked with over the years, none of these are persistent people that say, we will never give up. And were we shot down? Yes, absolutely, we're shot down. And there were times where we're like, oh, we had to concede. We had to concede on something that we didn't want to concede on, but we had to look at the bigger picture. We need parents behind us. It's not just the educators that can make this happen. It's the whole community. It's the whole system. That's my recommendation.
Yeah, I do think that parents hold a critical piece, and by educating themselves, and I think you're right about the school board. I don't think that the school board, is sort of a volunteer position, and you just go in and, hear everything, and it's a feel good. And right now, school boards need to stand up and really fight, and they need to be educated by the voters, which are the parents. Right. So, I think that's a critical point. All right, well, we have covered a lot of ground, and I think you have given parents a lot of really important information. So I want to thank you for your time, and just appreciate everything that you've done.
Thank you for the invitation, Brett. I enjoyed it. Thank you so much. Thanks for what you do.
Well, thank you. Literacy Now is a podcast designed specifically for parents in our effort to ensure every child learns to read. Parents deserve a seat at the table, and we bring their voices to the fore. We invite you to join the Parents for Reading Justice community on all of our socials, and make sure to visit our website to watch our documentary and to take our masterclass. All of our content is free of charge, because every child deserves to learn to read. This episode was brought to you by parentsforreadingjustice.org, produced by Brett Tingley and Keita Mascaro.